Lineages emergence in the Middle East region. Please, Antonello.
Thanks, Giancarlo. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm rather moving away from the risk of FMD topics and going in deep into the discussing evolutionary dynamics on Middle East. This is based on preliminary work that has been done on a large collection of foot-and-mouth disease sequences that is holding at Pirbright. And yeah, that are based basically on serotype A, on O, and Asia-1. Everyone knows that basically FMD is endemic in Middle East region and is a constantly evolving epidemiological status. Is widespread in ruminant population, and it's characterized by some sort of transmission pathway of foot-and-mouth disease lineage movement that is coming from the Middle East region and is going to Central Asia, the Far East, or Western Asia. And historically, we have been experiencing wave of infection on different lineages, starting basically characterizing from the pool, FMD pool number 2, that is basically belong to the serotype A, something like the A22, Iran 96, 99, Iran 05, the serotype O, Pan-Asia 1, Pan-Asia 2, and the recently circulating serotype Asia 1, SIN 08. It's quite clear that in Middle East there is a sort of a geographical clustering of foot-and-mouth disease lineages that is increasing genetic diversity and basically starting to evolve in some sort of sublineages that are characterized by this geographical cluster. Currently, we have no clear idea how these are evolving, how these are moving within the region, how is the evolutionary dynamic happening at the geographical scale or at country level. So the idea of this study is to try to retrospectively investigate how these lineages are moving around across the region, and taking an example the last 10 years, starting from 2005, 2010, 2004, and try to understand what evolutionary pressure FMD exhibit at the geographical level, and which kind of evolutionary competition is acting at the serotype level. I used around 2,000 foot-and-mouth disease sequences that are basically coming from the Pan-Asia 2 lineages, serotype O, the Iran 05 serotype A, and the all SIN 08 Asia 1 serotype. These are basically the geographical location of all the sequences that are used. Don't see this one because these are old Asia 1 serotype, Asia 1 isolate. Right, the part 1 is basically just to try to understand what is the trend in space and time of the single lineages across the region. If we are looking into Pan-Asia 2, basically what we are seeing is that in the beginning, around 2000, where is the most recent common ancestor, the first phylogenetic cluster was actually located in the sub-Indian continent, and all the evolving lineages was coming from that particular region. Going forward in time, we have experienced some sort of wave of new sublineages emerging in the Pakistan-Iran ecosystem, and some moving to the Turkey. And these are well defined at that geographical clustering level, where something like the Tehran 08, is basically just moving around Iran and Turkey. Some others are just basically clustering between the Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran ecosystem, and then moving to the Arabian Peninsula. And later on, there are much more largest wide-scale movement of lineages, something like the FAR 09, that going from Iran to Turkey and the Arabian Peninsula as well. And then the big incursion of these UNTen sublineages that is basically widespread across all the region. And this is clear across time. And the take-home message about, and then the last one circulating is the COM15, that is basically starting to appear from Iran and Pakistan. The take-home message from PhyloGeo 2 is that there are some widespreading and across all the region movement of lineages that are basically dictated by this kind of physical event of time lineages that are basically emerge, spread, and basically in the out, and then allowing other sublineages to move across the region. And the main trunk of the tree is basically starting from the Indian subcontinent, moving to Pakistan, then spreading to Iran, and then finally going to the Turkey. So there is this clear westward movement of lineages. Iran 05 is more or less the same story, rather than this is not starting from the sub-Indian continent, but it's rather start from Iran and then going to Turkey back in 1998, 1999, the most recent common ancestor. And as you can, as before for the PhyloGeo 2, basically there are some sort of geographical clustering where some sublineages, something like the FAR09, just cluster around the Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran ecosystem, and something like the Bahrain 08 is going, so the BAR 08 is going to have much more widespread diffusion within the region. And this is clear as well for the CIS-10 and Iran 10 that are basically something like HER10, are clustering again in the Pakistan-Afghanistan ecosystem in Iran, and the other one is spreading much more forward to Turkey. One clear take-home message for the Iran 05 is that it's clear that the Iran is the seeding factor of evolutionary trend that is basically transmitting all the new lineages to Turkey, first of all, and then there is this new ecosystem, something like the Afghanistan and Pakistan ecosystem, that is producing later on in time a much more evolutionary bit at sublineageal level. It's quite interesting to note that in Turkey there are waves of introduction, and when a sublineage is introduced in the country, emerge, explode, die out, and then the next step is basically to have another sublineages that is emerging, explode, and then die out. It's some sort of periodical activity of introduction of lineages. And this westward movement is quite really well defined when we are looking at the SIN 08 lineages of the Asia 1, where the main common ancestor was a Pakistan isolate back in 1996, where the westward movement was to Afghanistan and Iran, and then later on continuing some sort of evolutionary trend across the Pakistan ecosystem, and then later on emerged to everywhere else in the region, and mainly located in Turkey. As we saw before, the effect in Turkey is quite clear that there are periodical activity of introduction of lineages, and when basically some sort of sublineages dying out is emerging a new one. To understand this kind of clustering effect of evolutionary dynamic at geographical level, we can take in consideration the persistence. So the persistence is basically the elapsed time that it takes for lineages to move out of the country, and it's basically easily calculated from the tree, where you have the number of lineages that occur in through time, and the time length of the branch, and the number of the jumps that a lineages is producing in a tree, something like that. For example, it's going to, okay, that's a problem. Right, something like, for example, this is the length of the branch, the number of lineages occurring at this time point in Pakistan. At this time point, for example, there is a jump to Iran that is calculating as the lineages is moving out of the country. So when we are looking at the persistence, we see that there are two kinds of trends. There are Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan in Middle East where the persistence is really low, around 1-2 years. And every 1-2 years, there is a new lineages that is coming out of the country and is introduced in a new ecosystem. Where there is the clear status of Turkey, where the persistence is quite high and nothing is coming out from the country. And of course, if you're considering the jump that the lineages are taking in place in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan have a lot of movement out of the country where you can experience some sort of 2-3 lineage movement out of the country every year, where there is nothing that is coming out from Turkey. So basically, Turkey is introducing everything from the Middle East system, and is can be considered some sort of dead end host of evolutionary lineages.
1 more minute.
Right. And the other thing that is quite interesting to understand, what is the competing lineages, competing evolutionary dynamic between lineages. And what you can calculate from the tree is how many lineages are present in the tree and overlapping them between different serotypes. And what you experience in all the Middle East region is that you have this kind of periodical circulation of serotype across time, where there are interleaving serotypes, something like peaks of O, peaks then reducing the activity, peaks of A, reducing the activity, and back again the peak of O. And it's quite clear that it's both in producing evolutionary country, something like the Pakistan, and a receiving evolutionary country, something like Turkey, that is really similar to what we have seen from the NARSI presentation of the epidemiological data. Right, so the conclusion are, we described some sort of geographical range and evolutionary clustering at Middle East level. This is based on a country level. So this means that basically you have some sort of sampling bias, because potentially if we have much more important ecosystem that is based on potentially at population level that are more importantly involved in the evolutionary dynamics rather than a single country. But it's this clear trend of foot-and-mouth disease spread in the Western light election, where everything is coming from this particular ecosystem that is Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, and moving to Turkey with some incursion as well in the Arabian Peninsula. With the persistence estimation, we can see that there is some sort of evolutionary pressure at population level that is basically driven by this kind of increasing genetic diversity that can be driven by the local level of evolutionary dynamic that potentially is given by the fact that there are high densely populated area for example, in Pakistan with the Karachi dairy cattle system. And of course, we know that the Middle East experienced some sort of evolutionary waves of FMD activity that is something like is a continuous emergence and day out of FMD lineages that they are periodically circulating and periodically evolving between serotypes as well, but within serotype between sublineages. And then could be even more related to the livestock system and the movement of the livestock population across the region, and that might be affected by a pre-existing immunity. This kind of data, of course, is used in a retrospective analysis, but can inform as well some sort of predictive evolutionary model to understand which kind of lineages can occur in a kind of timely manner. And I would like to acknowledge all my colleagues in Pirbright and all the laboratory network that provide all the samples to us for doing this kind of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Antonello. We only have time for one quick question. So if there is a question from the audience, please. Naji, please.
Just, I would like to, rather than the question, some comment on this. I think this is the available genetic bank data this analysis made by Antonella. Just need a correction here, then the Turkey much more genetic analysis done and to share the gene bank. And now seems without the deep analysis, seems in Turkey much more evaluation of the virus diversity, of the genetic diversity should be the correct on this. I think there is an imbalance in the region, the available genetic analysis between Turkey and the other regions. Should be consider this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. I think we can move to the next presenter. Thank you, Antonello.